In 1620, while the Mayflower was in Provincetown, 18 of its men sailed in a small shallop, searching for a place to live. They came to present-day Eastham, where they were met by a group of Nauset. After a brief but violent encounter, the English left towards today's Plymouth. In 2020, we remember this first encounter. We explore its meanings for today and tomorrow. Welcome back to the Sunset Series. My name is Joanna Holleck, and I'm the coordinator of the Sunset Series with Eastham 400. I'm here today with Andrew Buckley, the producer of the film Stephano, the true story of Shakespeare's Shipwreck. Welcome.
Thank you.
So can you start by telling us a little bit about Stephen Hopkins? I know that he was the only passenger on the Mayflower who had been to the New World before. And how did he end up back in England and then on the Mayflower after going to Virginia?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that once they were able to, on Bermuda where they had been shipwrecked, they built 2 vessels, went off to Virginia where they found everyone in the colony that they were going to relieve was starving to death, making them regret that they ever left Bermuda. But therefore they were there for a number of years. He was basically indentured to the company, not an indentured servant to a particular person, but you signed up for 7 years, and once you did your 7 years, you got land, and the idea is that you were going to stay there. Well, he found out that his wife had died, and his children were basically in the care of the state, of the government, and so he had to return. So when he did return, we believe that he was on board the same vessel that Pocahontas was on when she went to visit England. So he goes into Plymouth, England, continues on, goes home. Pocahontas does her tour of that just about the same time that she's in London, and Hopkins himself finds himself in London. A young Wampanoag named Squanto, is also in London, having been brought to Spain as a captive and found his way to London to be in the employ. So Hopkins is in London at the same time that the most famous Native American at the time is there, plus Squanto. And so a case was made to us by historians in England that there were more Native Americans living in England at one time than there were English living in North America. And so there's a lot of information going back and forth. And so eventually, Hopkins gets hooked up with, in one way or another, with this group of separatists who are planning to go to the New World. And so the thing is that at this point, he seems to have some money. And we realize that it's very possible that he did his 7 years, he got land in Virginia, sold it, and now he's one of the wealthiest people who's joining in on this voyage to Plymouth, or what would become Plymouth. And so it may have been their local Native American expert on board, because he was the only one who had been there before, aside from the captain, of course. And so he goes over. Of course, that we know that he, first Provincetown, and then they make their way, and of course, first encounter right here, and eventually they make their way to Plymouth, which is the site of Squanto's original village. And 6 months later, Squanto walks into the village himself, and the idea that we always were wondering is, perhaps if they had met each other in London prior, so when Squanto walks into Plymouth in the spring of 1621, had Stephen Hopkins met him before? Was Squanto a stranger, or was he actually someone that Stephen Hopkins certainly would have known about, although that's not mentioned? But anyway, so that it certainly talks to a different sort of relationship that Stephen Hopkins had with the Native Americans, just from the very get-go.
And that's one of the things that we are discussing a lot here on the Sunset Series, with Eastham being the site of the first encounter. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other local connections that this story has to Eastham?
Well, as I've mentioned a lot, my mother was a Hopkins from Hopkins Lane in East Orleans. She was, as everyone else at the time, she wasn't born there because there was a midwife just across the town line in Eastham. My grandmother was a Knowles from Eastham as well. So we've got that long-standing connection here. I always make the joke that, my family didn't head west like everybody else's did. We headed east because we had enough adventure for a lifetime and then some. So my family's been here in the area for quite some time, and we were noticing that as I was going along, Giles Hopkins ended up here. He's in the Cove burying ground along with his sister Constance, and there must have been something in the family itself. Even Stephen Hopkins in late life was trying to get out of Plymouth, wanted to move down to the Cape himself, and his contemporaries wouldn't let him. He was really trying to get out, we think, from the yoke of the establishment, which he had been trying to get out from basically all his life. And he seemed to have better relationship with the Native Americans than he did with his countrymen.
That's very interesting. And of course, for us here in Eastham, particularly interesting to hear about Constance. And if you've watched some of our other Sunset Series episodes, you'll know that we talked a little bit about the 7 founding families of Eastham, one of them being Constance Hopkins Snow and her husband. And so they were some of the first people to move out here in 1646. So it's really interesting to see the way that all these different places and peoples connect together.
Yeah, and Constance, of course, plays a role because when Stephen Hopkins is begging for his life in chains, having been convicted of mutiny in Bermuda, he's saying, if you execute me, you're going to leave my wife a widow and my children as orphans. And in England at the time, you were basically condemning them to death as well. And also at the same time, they're coming over. When their mother does die, Hopkins has to return from Jamestown and go retrieve them back in England again. And it's Constance and Giles that he's kind of springing.
And then they came over with him on the Mayflower.
Exactly. So they had already known their father having adventures, even before they stepped foot on the Mayflower.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for being here with us, sharing these stories and these connections, and it's great to have you here. And I encourage you all to go out and see the documentary that Andrew has produced, Stephano, The True Story of Shakespeare's Shipwreck. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
My name is Joanna Holleck. Thank you for your support of the Sunset Series and Eastham 400. If you're interested in supporting Eastham 400 efforts by purchasing commemorative items, we do have several items for sale on our website, eastham400.org. We are selling gold foil First Encounter ornaments, t-shirts with the Eastham 400 logo, and montages made by a local artist. The ornaments feature an image of the shallop and come with a special description card. The t-shirts are available in light blue, navy, and ash gray, and in sizes adult small through 3XL. The montage depicts watercolor images of important historic and well-known landmarks around the town of Eastham. Each of these items are $20. Thank you.